Dynamite Network presents Football Time.
And welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for college football week 10. We're winding down here. It's almost conference championship season and bowl season, and then we're in the off season. So it's been a quick 10 weeks here, but a fun 10 weeks as we sort of close things down. So with us, as always, is Dynamite. David, we had our first set of, I guess, playoff rankings come out. Not that they mean that much, but anyway, want to give your thoughts on them, even though I don't take them too seriously right now, especially with so many teams with so many important games left to play.
Yeah, I think, you can't really take it to heart too much right now, but one thing the committee did make clear is that they're really relying on that eye test a little bit more this year rather than just win-loss record. I mean, you see Oklahoma down as low as 8, and they're undefeated. Cincinnati was at 6 or 7, I believe. So just really no respect for those teams that have the weaker schedules. And Alabama with, a loss sitting in that number 2 spot. So really just looking at that eye test and just seeing what teams look like. And if they're playing well, which I actually prefer, I'm glad they did that. I liked Oregon in there at the 3 spot.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to end up getting better football in the playoffs and less one-sided matchups. So I think this is good. It's a little change from the committee, in my opinion. I think in years past, you would have seen Oklahoma and Cincinnati right there at 3 and 4, maybe even 2 and 3. So I think they were really aggressive in this first one just to show and announce to people that scheduling is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought the rankings were pretty solid. Michigan State being up there, I was a little iffy at. That was the only one I was a little like, if Michigan State.
There's a lot.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say there's still a lot in the
Yeah.
Big Ten right there between Michigan State, Ohio State, and all those guys. That's going to probably clear itself out, no problem.
Yeah, that was the main thing. I mean, if they went out, they probably deserve to be in there. But like right now, if you're watching those teams and, Michigan State were to play Alabama or, Georgia, I think you'd make both those teams almost a 20-point favorite in those games. I was trying to, ponder in my head what the lines would be for those, and at what point would I not take Alabama? And I think Michigan State would probably have to be around 24. The biggest one is Cincinnati sitting at 6 undefeated. I think they still have a chance to move up. They still can play SMU. They still play Houston, and then they probably play another one of those teams in the championship game. So I think.
I think they would benefit greatly from another Bama or another Oregon loss.
Yeah.
If those teams were to get 2, they would drop, and that's where a Cincinnati could or a Oklahoma could move up in there.
But I thought, 6, good spot for them. I didn't think they were overrated. I would have been mad if they had gotten sort of below 6 in some of those, weaker teams that are behind them. But I think 6 was pretty fair. And, I think Cincinnati, a good football team. I think they can play with a lot of those teams. I don't think I'd put them as favorites, but I might put them as favorites over, say a Michigan State. I think they're in and around where they should be. So I didn't see too much controversy with this first set of rankings.
Yeah, it's actually the first one that I've really agreed with for the most part. Normally I disagree with the committee a little bit just because they look at that win-loss record. They don't look at strength of schedule or strength of conferences. So I like the change, and I think it's going to be good moving forward into when they finally grow the playoffs into 8 teams. Get some really good football.
I really liked where they sort of placed Oklahoma. They don't have a loss, but they should have losses, and they don't look like a good football team. So I liked that. So we'll move on from the rankings and get into Week 10. Let's get into a handful of matchups. Not a ton of really tight matchups, but I think as the pressure, sort of builds up as the season comes to a close, these games get a little bit, tighter and tighter, especially for some of these teams where, they aren't used to having that kind of pressure to close out the season. This first game is not one of them. It's probably not even really a game of the week, but, Georgia, number one team in the country, 39-point favorites here versus Mizzou. I don't think either of us think there's a chance for an upset here, but let's go spread-wise. Coverage, 39. As bad as Mizzou is, that seems like an awful lot of points in a conference game here. I'm curious your thoughts on this one.
I said earlier this year that anytime in an SEC game outside of Vanderbilt, when you're getting 30-plus, you take the 30-plus. But, Missouri's been really bad this year.
What about when you're getting 40-plus?
I don't know, because I've seen teams just do whatever they want against Missouri. I guess it depends on. I'd say Georgia tries to rest up a lot of people, not get too many reps, stay healthy. I think that's the biggest challenge for them this weekend. The game isn't the challenge; it's staying sharp, staying healthy, moving forward. So they might not be looking to bury it. They might just be looking to grab the lead, run clock, and get out of that game and move on to the next one.
Yeah, the problem I have with that, though, is I think if Georgia puts in their four-string running back, he still might run for 400 yards against this Missouri defense.
I could also see, 3 or 4 defensive and special team touchdowns in this game as well. So if that happens, it could go downhill really quick. But I don't know how much. I mean, there's no statement Georgia can make from this game other than to win barely or lose. So I think once they put it away, they're just going to look to end it as quick as they can, because no matter how big they win, no one's going to think any higher of Georgia. So it's not like you can get style points by winning by 40 or 50 here. So it may be a smart play taking Missouri here, but I'm probably not going to take anything in that one.
Yeah, I once I've seen that Mizzou defense as they part C's for running games that just let you run down the middle and see if you might trip over a sideline or something.
I'd like to see what I could do against their defensive line. I might be able to get some yardage.
I think pretty much that would be every running back's dream when they see Mizzou walk in. So 39 and a half some places. I probably am a pass on this game, but I wouldn't be bold enough to really take Mizzou. There are some really shockingly high spreads in a couple of these conference games, though. But this isn't one I really would latch on to as bad as, Mizzou's been. And I don't know if they can score, which would be the other requisite you'd need for them to cover that kind of spread. All right, let's go to Ohio State going to Nebraska. In the 1980s, this was a very big deal. But in 2020, not as much of a big deal. Nebraska's a weird sort of team. They're a little bit plucky. They seem to play tight, close games. They never seem to win any of those tight, close games. Buckeyes go in there with a 15-point line coming off a mixed sort of showing versus Penn State. They seem to find their rhythm a little late. I didn't think they looked great in that game, but Nebraska coming off the loss to Purdue, once again in a 28-23 point game. I think their margin of victory to margin of loss probably is quite small. But what do you make of this game in the 15-point spread here at Nebraska?
Yeah, this Nebraska team, I really feel for them because they've fought hard in every single game. They've seemed so close to being able to break over that edge and finally break through. Just haven't been able to do it this year. And unfortunately for them, I don't think Ohio State's going to be the team to do that against. Now, they do have this one at home, so they may be able to get a little bit of atmosphere and play some stifling defense. They've been playing pretty good defense this year, but I don't think if it gets into a shootout, which is what Ohio State wants, they'll be able to keep up because Ohio State's offense has been probably one of the more impressive offenses in the country ever since that Oregon game. They've been really rolling. So I hate to say it, but Nebraska's getting another L and probably not going to cover that point spread either.
Yeah, I kind of like the points here, 15. Ohio State sort of stepped up in competition versus Penn State. Did not look as good as it looked, versus Indiana, the other, sort of walk-bys that they had. So I think Nebraska, you mentioned it, has played hard in every game. they had a really, really tough schedule. We talked about it, how hard their schedule was, and that Illinois loss just, it is really, really crushing to them because they're just going through it right now. And I do think it's a credit to how hard they've played. They just haven't been able to pull out these close games. It's that time of year where we sort of switch it to every coach is on the hot seat. Scott Frost, record-wise, has not looked good, but it doesn't seem like these guys have quit on him. I'm curious, do you think he comes back? Should he come back to Nebraska after this season?
I think so. Now, I am an outsider and not as, loyal as, say, the Nebraska fan base or an alum or someone on the faculty there. But I think you can see the change starting in Nebraska. It just hasn't quite hit yet. Now, yes, it is taking a long time. But at the same time, who are you going to go get that's going to be that big explosive hire? Nebraska's a really tough place to go to right now, especially since that move to the Big Ten. And so it's not a really attractive place to go coach because you've got a lot of challenges facing you as far as schedule goes, and you're probably not even in the top 6 programs in that conference. So I think they hang on to him for at least one more year, and just to see if some of these close games. I mean, he's 3 or 4 games away from flipping all of them and having.
They could just
wins.
as easily be 6-3 instead of 3-6. This year with a win over. At like Michigan State, that game was Nebraska controlled that game. They gave up a punt return for a touchdown, then lost in overtime, right there at the end of that's just fluky weirdness. That's not, you played bad, they played good sort of football game style.
Yeah. I don't think if you're Nebraska, you give up on your dream hire just yet. You want this to work. You don't want to give up on Scott Frost because you want him to be successful at his alma mater. And, so, I've actually started rooting for them a little bit more. They do have a lot of fight, and it'd be interesting to see next year if they can keep a little bit of momentum and maybe get some more talent in there, especially at the quarterback position. Yeah. And I think he's had Martinez there for a couple of years, and he's just had bad quarterback play the whole time. So if he can get a decent quarterback, maybe they can get that offense improved because I think their defense is getting better each year, and I think he should be back.
Yeah, you said it. You mentioned how hard they played. I think they played hard throughout the year. And then who are you going to get that's, better? You're going to bring in and around the same type of coach as Scott Frost. They just, they mentioned like Scott Satterfield at Louisville. Is Scott Satterfield at Louisville that much better?
I think Louisville's a better program at this time.
They mentioned, Stoops at Kentucky. I'm like, what? Why would you just laterally move to Nebraska just because in the 80s and the mid-90s they were a dominant football program,
The past decade, it's actually been easier to win at Kentucky than it's been in Nebraska.
That's if you want to just start looking at past decades of past football programs, I guess we should bring in the Harvard football coach because from about 1900 to 1940, they owned the football landscape. So, it's just, I think Scott Frost is a good coach. This has taken a lot longer, but, Nebraska is not Nebraska that, most of us have grown up with. It's sort of a middle rung program, and it was literally at rock bottom when he took over.
Well,
so
the similarities between Nebraska and my team, Tennessee Vols, are eerie. And I think, at Tennessee, we've seen how coaching change after coaching change after coaching change. It doesn't get you any further along. You always have to go back to ground zero. And I think they've been improving year after year under Scott Frost. So I think they need to stay the course and at least see this out for another year or two.
Yeah, this is where you don't necessarily look at the record. You look at what's taken place on the field. I've thought they played hard. They just, in most of the game, they aren't more talented than the other team they play. So, I think it's improving. I wouldn't drop him quite yet. But let's get into the next game. Illinois goes to Minnesota. Now, one of the teams I didn't enjoy being in the Committee's top 25 was Minnesota. I guess we just ignore that Bowling Green loss and, scratch it off that they pretty much lost to the worst team in the MAC. I guess that's a cross off because it was an accidental. But anyway, Minnesota seemed to sort of find its way back after that loss. They're tied up there as the conference lead. 14.5 points here versus Illinois. What do you make of this game here?
Yeah, I came really close to taking this one. I actually like the points here with Illinois. I think they've been playing really well, and they've been in a lot of games. They haven't really been getting blown out a whole lot. I think they had one a couple weeks ago. They lost by about 20. But I don't see Minnesota burying Illinois, and it's going to be a really ugly Big Ten football game. Probably going to be cold. I haven't looked at the weather. But I like 14.5 here. I think that's a good bit of points.
Yeah, you mentioned it.
They end up taking this one.
Yeah, I liked the points here. This is where I like Illinois. Last week I was off them because they were, in and around even money to, slightly favored at home versus Rutgers. I don't like Illinois as, close. But if they're getting a lot of points, they're just going to take the air out of the ball. Minnesota is already taking the air out of the ball. So this game is basically just going to be two teams running into the line of scrimmage and hoping the game ends quickly here. You see that in the over-under sitting at 44. I think the only one that was lower was the Air Force Army game, which was I went
37.
I went to go in there and take that for my picks per automatic always take, and then it was sitting at 36, and I'm like, well, that's starting to push in and around a line I'm not really willing to go to. So 44.
Army just put up 50, 60 against Wake.
That's what I was not about to jump on Army, who's shown they can be explosive. Air Force has been an explosive offense all year long.
Maybe a good over.
That might be to the point where I'm sitting on over. Of course, I say that, and it's an 11:30 game in Colorado. So that gave me a little bit of a pullback on that.
11:30 Eastern.
Yes. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern. That's why I was going to take Air
9:30 a.m. their time.
Yes, I was going to take Air Force, and then I guess we switched to covering that game because
I guess the military schools are used to waking up.
That was
early.
my only thing. I was like, I guess the military schools are sort of okay waking up early, but I was like, oh, I'll pass on that one. But I like Illinois getting the plus here, especially a couple touchdowns. I'm still not a total believer in Minnesota. I should probably stop taking Northwestern. They are just a bad football team. They had one spark, but we mentioned that Nebraska team. That was a 30-23 game, another close, tight game that went down to the wire. The Purdue game, 2013. We mentioned the Bowling Green loss. They've beaten up on the aforementioned let's beat up on the Big Ten. They beat up on Maryland Northwestern. You get those two, everybody seems to look good and come out being hot all of a sudden. So I'm a little curious how this game's going to play, especially since these two teams are quite similar, other than Minnesota probably has a little bit of the talent advantage here. All right, let's move on to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons and the North Carolina Tar Heels. Wake Forest comes in 8-0 and are racking up, points left and right. Hang a 45 on the Duke the week after hanging 70 on the aforementioned Army. UNC went into Notre Dame, fought pretty hard in that game. I thought they could get that cover, just couldn't quite keep Notre Dame scoring in check, but at least a solid effort, I'd say, versus Notre Dame. But I thought this line was a little weird. Wake getting 2.5 versus North Carolina. Yeah. This North Carolina team basically has looked like garbage all year long. Wake might not be able to defend a whole lot, but they can score a whole lot of points. And last time I checked, it wasn't like North Carolina's defense was ready to lock anybody down. So I was a little stunned at the 2.5 number here. Just more and more disrespect towards Wake and not respecting what they've done so far this season.
Yeah, undefeated, and they've beaten a few few good teams, and North Carolina has done nothing really to get the respect this year. So I don't know why they're getting points here. I really like Wake here. I'm taking them plus the 2.5, and I actually I want to take the over. I think last I looked, it was at 66, 67, which is a little inflated. I'm not sure what it's at currently. But after watching that Wake Army game and seeing how bad Wake plays defense, this could be a shootout. But I think Wake's going to keep it rolling. I don't think this is going to be where they drop it.
Yeah, I think they'll keep it rolling. They're going to have the game they want. They're going to have a shootout game. I assume this plays out a lot like the Notre Dame game the week before with North Carolina, where North Carolina's there, but they don't quite have enough of the high leveraged offense to match Notre Dame here. So I like the Wake spread getting 2.5. I don't foresee going into North Carolina as a cauldron of doom here. Everybody has switched off and gone into college basketball mode there anyway. So, this isn't exactly like a real hard place to go. Not to mention Wake Forest isn't all that far from North Carolina. So if anybody's still into football on these two, it's probably Wake, and they're going to bring in just as many fans as North Carolina is probably going to bring in. Really interesting on that line. I was a little stunned that they'd make Wake such an underdog in that game. The other thing is, if this Wake team would have been very, very interesting if that Michigan State running back was still on this roster. We might be talking about the greatest offense of all time. They probably could have hung 100 on the Army game. So that's just a little bit fun to think about. But we'll move on to the SEC, probably the biggest game in the SEC on the week. Auburn going to Texas A&M. Both these teams sort of have found themselves lately. Auburn coming off a good win over Ole Miss, dominating pretty good. Showed us shut that Ole Miss offense down. I guess, though, now that we've seen Ole Miss, they've come up against two solid defenses and been in and around 20 points. So, you're sort of looking at that. But A&M sort of have found their way. I guess you can say that, they have the big win over Bama, and then they got the cream puff double dip of Mizzou, South Carolina, which I think everybody lives off that cream puff Mizzou, South Carolina back-to-back. It seems like a couple teams have gotten that, and then coming out of those two games, everything is rosy. Interesting line here, 4.5 for Texas A&M. I'm willing to think A&M's a better team here, but Auburn's played good football of late, but I think going into A&M, I lean a little A&M here. I'm curious what you think of this matchup here.
Another big-time situation for Auburn here. They had a lot of road challenges this year. They went into Penn State, and this is going to be a similar atmosphere, if not worse. I think definitely not more people. And A&M's rolling. They've got some momentum. And I think 4.5 is a little, probably right on the money, but I'd have to lean A&M here.
Yeah, I want to take A&M really, really badly in this game. I don't like that crooked number at 4.5 because this game breeds bad decision making towards the end. Let's see who backdoors you and sort of screws you out of the money there. So I'd be a little leery of the A&M. But I think A&M's playing good football. I think they're going to close the season really, really well here. So I kind of like the A&M, but, you can't really hate on the way Auburn has played basically since that, Penn State game, other than the, loss to Georgia, which, right now Georgia's just a better team than they are. They went into LSU, won that game. I think we both thought, LSU would win that one, high in sight. Maybe not a great pick, but I going into Arkansas, winning that game 38-23, pretty impressive win. We mentioned the Ole Miss win last week at 31-20. Bo Nix is playing a good quarterback right now, which, I've hammered him a lot, but if you play good football, I'm not going to hammer you. He's played good football. So should be a really interesting and entertaining game. The number at 4.5, little off-putting, but it'll be interesting to see which one of these teams really elevates and makes that sort of boom and probably puts themselves right below that cusp of a playoff line in getting into one of those, major, primetime New Year's bowl games here. All right, let's switch out to the Big 12. We'll go Oklahoma State, who goes to West Virginia. We called it a little bit on West Virginia, last week versus Iowa State. Iowa State going there, losing that game, 38-31 for West Virginia. They continue to be sort of a good 500 team. They play well, but sometimes they sort of ruin themselves. They'd look a lot better if they had that nice Oklahoma win where they didn't completely self-destruct. But Oklahoma State, coming off the loss to Iowa State, beat up on Kansas. Curious your thoughts on this matchup. I know we both really, really liked West Virginia at home getting points. They're doing that again this week. What do you think of this one?
It's really tempting to double dip on West Virginia again here, but I'm afraid it might get burned if you try to do that. So you're playing with fire if you take West Virginia 2 weeks in a row because they are a very up and down team. That being said, we do like them at home, getting points at home, and this is a team that lost to the team we just beat the week prior. So by that theory, then you should even have a better shot at winning this one, but I don't know about that. I think Oklahoma's State's I think they're a more talented team than Iowa State. Yeah. And so I think this may be one where, the just athletes and player talent prevail. And so I'm not going to make a play here. I don't think it's as much of a sure thing as it was last week against Iowa State.
I will say I definitely liked last week's a little bit better because Iowa State's their defense isn't all that great to really put the pressure on, West Virginia's biggest weakness, which is offensive and quarterback play to create those turnovers that give them, sort of freebie points. Oklahoma State's defense has been much, much better this year, but, I do just sort of like this trend of West Virginia at home getting points. 3.5, little lower than the, I think bloated sort of 7 the week before with Iowa State. I just thought that was completely ridiculous. But Iowa State has been getting steam all year long for basically doing nothing all year long. But I sort of like this trend. I'm curious about this Oklahoma State team. We were a little lax on them early in the year. They've proven that they can find ways to win games. We'll see if they can go into, Morgantown, win this one in a tough one, as really the Big Ten sort of has all their major games here to close out the season, the last couple weeks of the season here. But should be an entertaining game. See how Oklahoma State goes into West Virginia. I would like this much better if it was a noon game instead of the 3:30 start. But the 3.5, Morgantown getting plus has always been a good little niche thing to grab so far this year. We'll move to the Big Ten. Michigan State coming off their big win over Michigan goes to Purdue. This Purdue team has been pretty much hard to read all year long. Go to Nebraska, win, play Wisconsin at home, lose, go to Iowa, win, play Minnesota, lose. So it's been a little bit of a lotto all year long. Their defense has been really, really solid. Michigan State, really, really interesting. Basically should have been massacred in that game versus Michigan. If like 2 different plays go wrong, that's probably a 40 to 13 game, and we look at Michigan State totally different. The week before, Michigan State struggles with Indiana at 2015. Indiana has been atrocious all year long. They beat up on Rutgers, but they struggle with the aforementioned Nebraska. So what are you getting out of this game, Michigan State going to Purdue here?
I love Michigan State here. I think 3 is awfully small for an undefeated team going up against a very inconsistent Purdue team. Now, hopefully we don't get, awesome Purdue, which has been about every other week. So I guess they're due this week if you follow that pattern. But I don't think this Michigan State team is similar to Iowa, the other top team that Purdue managed to knock off. Iowa was very reliant on their just offense producing, or their defense producing for their offense.
Yeah.
And
Well, you
I
saw
think
that last week as well in that Wisconsin-Iowa matchup. The Iowa offense has just gone in the tank, and the turnovers dried up, and then they're sort of done.
So I do like Michigan State here, and I think they may drop one this season, probably Ohio State, but I don't think they are going to fool around with Purdue, and they're going to go in and take care of business. It's probably one of my favorite picks this week.
Interesting. So we're on the opposite sides of this one. See, I'm going to bet on the good Purdue showing up this week, and I think I'm going to bet a little bit more on the Michigan State regression off that Michigan game, hyped up off that win, now going into the road into a little bit of a trap situation here versus Purdue with Ohio State coming up on the schedule, in 2 weeks. So I think this could be a little bit of a tricky spot here for Michigan State. So I sort of like the plus here, but like we've said, Purdue, we're either going to get the win or they're going to get beat. It's one way or the other. They're going to get beat bad, or they're going to end up doing some freaky sort of thing and getting a win here. So it's not been really any other way, but I'm on the opposite side. I kind of like Purdue getting points at home here, but interesting game, certainly, to see how this plays out after Michigan State's big win, over Michigan. We talked about teams with the pressure building up. The pressure begins to build up with Michigan State, now. They have their sights set on the playoff, when they get waxed 30-0 by Georgia or Alabama, I don't know. But, right now it's in their sights, in their hands. They win out, they'll probably be in. So, interesting game as the pressure mounts in that one. You're on the Michigan State side. I'm on the Purdue side. Should be a fun one to see how it plays out. Next up, Baylor goes to TCU. This is, I think there are two things to talk about here. We'll touch on the TCU, situation in a few minutes. Baylor, 7-1 now, and honestly, I legit think they might be the best team in the Big 12. They handled Texas like they've handled everybody else. They handled BYU. They handled West Virginia probably better than anybody has all season long in a 45-20 blowout. Their loss coming in a tough game at Oklahoma State, which was tight to the very end. They beat Iowa State. So I'm very interested on the Baylor side of things, but -7 on the road. What do you think of this one in a pretty big rivalry game, Baylor TCU?
I love Baylor here. They've slowly become my favorite team in this conference, playing the best football. I talked earlier about that eye test. Baylor looks good. Oklahoma State does not look good. They get some wins, but they don't look good. Oklahoma, they're undefeated. They don't look good. Baylor looks like a good football team, and they're doing what they're supposed to do other than that one tight one they dropped earlier this year. And this is a team that we had in the preseason. I think their over-under line was at 3. So very, very impressed with Baylor and the turnaround in this program. They're going to get some momentum rolling, and I like it here. I got this one early. I got it at -6.5. I'm sticking with it. I love that pick. I think they're going to win big here against a TCU team that's probably given up on the season. Their coach is moving on. Maybe there's a little bit to play for there, to play for your coach that's been there for almost as long as I've been alive. But I think he was before this letting him go, he's the longest tenured coach in FBS football.
Yes.
So he's been there a long time, but I don't think TCU's got what it takes. They haven't looked very good this year, and Baylor's going to shut them down and win big.
Yeah, I think that 6.5 number probably a little bit better than that 7 number. You mentioned it. The TCU probably can go one way or the other. They're either going to go totally in the bag, or they're going to play for Gary and try to close out this season strong. But I'll get into what TCU did to Gary. Cutting him off at the end of the week, and then trying to parade him around to, close out the year as a sending off. And he was pretty much like, screw you. Now he's going to coach him out. It shows what he is. But basically what TCU did was despicable for a coach who...
Reminds me of another coach I know that got fired at a program I love.
Yeah. But, TCU was basically nothing. Legit nothing until Gary Patterson there. You go look at their history, other than a stretch in the 1940s under, legendary Dutch Meyer. That's the 1940s. They've basically been a garbage program. They were a whipping boy in the Southwest Conference to the point where by the time that Gary Patterson took over, they were in the Western Athletic Conference, which does not have a football conference anymore. He built them from a Western Athletic Conference into Conference USA, into the Mountain West, and then got them into the Big 12. His record overall is 160-57 at TCU, which was a crap program. This is legit building something from nothing into what it is now, which has basically for the last 15 years been the best school in Texas.
It's enough to name the stadium after him.
They have a statue of him, and what they did to him, I just thought was crummy. And now they're going to bring in some hotshot, and my guess is this program probably drops back, into the realm of oblivion. And with the Big 12 conference, teetering on the brink as it is, if this thing drops off enough, they might be headed back down into one of those smaller conferences. So, I really, really like Gary Patterson. I don't know if he's going to coach on after this. That being said, it might have been time for him to go. He had a couple bad years in there, but he was still recruiting at a pretty high level. But it's this weird thing where TCU now, for some reason, thinks it has the right to win 10 games every year. And it's just not that kind of program. It's not Oklahoma. It's not Ohio State. It's not Alabama. It's a program that's going to go through waves. And I don't know, just seemed like a crappy thing to do to a coach who basically built you from the WAC into the Big 12 and to cut him off like that because, he's had a couple losing seasons in a row here. It doesn't feel right. And we'll see if they can maintain after this. But you mentioned it. I think Baylor's a play, but there is that option where maybe TCU closes out this season hard because they do have talent there. How many of them are going in the transfer portal in the next couple weeks will be interesting. But I think that 6.5, much better number than the 7 there. All right, let's move on to interesting game in the SEC. Mississippi State at Arkansas. Arkansas coming off after having a really, really tough schedule, coming off the easy game in Arkansas, Pine Bluff, then a bye. So they've had about a 2-week break here. Mississippi State continues to play really, really good football here. Big win over Kentucky last week. Beat them up pretty easy. Arkansas, 4.5-point favorites here. I love this Mississippi State team. I think they're a much better team than this Arkansas team, both defensively and offensively. I'm curious your take on this game.
I think Mississippi State's talented enough to keep this one close.
Yeah.
May not win it. I think this could come down to a field goal. But I don't see Arkansas blowing them out. I think Mississippi State's good enough offensively to hang with a lot of people, and just got a really impressive win against Kentucky. And there's something to be said about keeping that competition fresh and not getting complacent. Where Arkansas getting a bye and playing a bad team could be a little bit too much time off of playing tough competition. So Mississippi State got some momentum, got a big win, and I guess you could say Kentucky's a big win. It's sad that Kentucky's a big win now, but they were top 25 team.
Yeah.
So
they were a top 10 team at that point. So
yeah. I like Mississippi State here getting the points. I haven't taken this one yet, but I may lean that way.
Yeah, I think if this was like 3, I'd probably be a little less lenient to take Mississippi State, but 4.5 just seems like a lot. I could see it where Arkansas dominates the line of scrimmage, but really that doesn't hold a lot of water because Mississippi State's set up to be like, okay, you can dominate the line of scrimmage. We're getting the ball out in half a second and throwing a 3-yard pass.
Well, Kentucky plays that kind of line of
Yeah.
scrimmage game too, and Mississippi State didn't have any trouble with it.
Yeah. And then you flip things over, and I know people, they think Mike Leach, but if you go back and look at a lot of those Washington State teams, they all had solid defense. He's once again built another solid defense at the Mississippi State. And, outside of the Georgia-Alabama range, I think Mississippi State's probably the third best defense in the SEC. It certainly can be arguable, definitely playmakers-wise. If you look at guys who are going to move on into the NFL, Mississippi State's probably going to have the third most on the defensive side of the ball. So especially in that secondary. So interesting game here. Really interested in this one. But I'm going to keep riding my Mississippi State at 4.5 on this just because I just think they're the better team with the better players here. Granted, Arkansas, coming off essentially a double bye, but I'm interested to see how they get thrown back into the fire after, sort of shutting things down for, 2 weeks there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into your Mountain West matchup of the week. Boise State going to Fresno. And we don't see this very much, but Boise State getting 5 points here. This history has not been great for Fresno, but if there's a time for them to grab them, it's probably this year because Boise probably will be back into their dominant ways next year once as the coaching staff sets up and they can sort of tip back to where they are. But what do you make of this one? Fresno State -5.
Yeah, I'm battling my brain and my heart here in this one. I've come to love Fresno this year, but I really want to take Boise plus the 5. I think that's a really, really good amount of points for a good Boise State team. Not the best Boise State team, but they're still Boise, and they're the same Boise they've been for the past 20 years, and not quite as dominant this year. In Fresno, they've had their ups and downs. They've had some games where they haven't performed as well. They've dropped some they shouldn't have. Like I said, if I had to pick here, I would probably take Boise, but I'm just going to sit back and watch the results of this one.
Yeah, it's interesting here. I think you always got to be aware when Boise's getting plus, certainly the 5. Now, they have not been quite as good this year, but also, I mean, they could be just as close to, the 7-2 that Fresno is. They've had a lot of sort of freaky games out there that has made this record look a little bit worse than it is. Other than probably the Nevada game, every other game has sort of been, a freaky little thing here or there that is it's just one of those years where it's gone against them each time, whereas in the years past, those freaky things might have gone for them. And, instead of sitting at like 8-0, or 7-1, they're sitting at 4-4 because it happens to be one of those years. Fresno, I thought, played their best game in a long time in that San Diego State game. I thought they looked really, really good. Now, we mentioned it last week where what does San Diego State have if they get behind? They got behind. They weren't really capable of, opening up the offense. They have a certain style play. And if they have to get outside that style of play, they aren't capable of, really coming back. But I think that win before, 34-32 versus Nevada, was really, really impressive. But once again, they didn't cover that game, -3.5. I think this game plays out, somewhat similar to that game where it's probably tight, and we'll see it at a last-second score. So I think the value's there in Boise State. I wouldn't quite grab the value at -5 for Fresno State. But if they want the Mountain West, this is the game they have to take and show they're the team this year to be the Mountain West champ here. All right, let's go to LSU, Alabama. This isn't a marquee game, but Alabama is playing, and sort of just a freak thing. I was like 28.5. I saw this, and I was like, is this the biggest spread in LSU, Alabama history? I went back in modern history, as in the 2000s. Yes, you start easing out of the 90s, and it becomes a little bit harder to find those lines and what they were. Uncle Tony running numbers out of Long Island didn't post a lot of his numbers in the 70s and 60s. But, just going off the top of my head, even in like the mid 90s, both these teams were poor. So I don't think the number would have been, high into this number. So I'm willing to bet 28.5 is probably the biggest this number's ever been in this matchup. So 28.5 LSU at Alabama. These two teams were playing for a national championship, 6 years ago, and now we got a 30-point spread. So what do you make of this game here?
I'd have to, that line is right where it needs to be, I think. Because I'm torn either way. I can't really, pick a clear and obvious pick there. LSU's pretty much given up on this season. I think they're waiting to see who their next coach is going to be, whether or not they're going to hit that transfer portal. I'm sure some people are. And LSU had one game where they ran the ball well, and then they went back to not really running the ball well. So I don't know what they're going to be able to do against this Alabama team, but I like Alabama. But not, 28.5 is an awful lot against, who won a national championship 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So how the mighty have fallen, and I can't make a play here. I think that line's right on the money.
Yeah, I don't think I can take Bama at 28.5, but I certainly have no interest in grabbing LSU at 28.5 in this one, especially with, I think everybody is ready to hit the, transfer portal there. We might see the fun Sark maneuver where Washington State pretty much just hands USC their bad coach because they know he's a terrible coach. And I think Penn State's pretty much ready to do the same with LSU. Like, if you want him, you're welcome to him. We've seen enough here. So that should be interesting if that pulls out. But I think it's too much to grab Bama, not enough for, LSU here. It'll be interesting to see if Bama wants to run this one up too. They don't tend to do that, but Saban might have a little bit more cutthroatness to run this up if he sees fit. All right, we'll move to another SEC game. Interesting one here. Tennessee, Kentucky. This line is flipped totally. Well, basically in a bad way for both you and I, because I think we had our eye on this game about 2 weeks ago where we thought Tennessee would be getting, 3 or 4 points. They're now a 1-point favorite on the road to Kentucky here. That being said, I'm now not in love with this line, whereas if you gave me 3 or 4, I'd be a little bit more in love with it. What do you make of this one? Are you still in love with it on the -1 as a road favorite here?
Yeah, I'm still on it. I think I got the money line when it was a 1-point dog for Tennessee, so I got like plus 105. But I think this line's going to keep moving. I think everyone sees that this is a really good matchup for Tennessee to finally, cut their teeth on it, and just they match up perfectly against Kentucky. Tennessee's strength defensively is against the run game. That's Kentucky's strength offensively. They can't really throw the ball very much at all. When they do, they turn it over, and Tennessee can put on a lot of points. I think this could be a big blowout, actually. So I think this line's going to continue to grow the more people actually look into the game and what each team's strengths are.
Yeah. Fun to look at the just betting numbers on this one. 51% on Tennessee, 49% on Kentucky. You think, oh, even. But then you look at the money. 81% of the money on Tennessee to 19% on Kentucky. So this thing is just, hammered down. And I think Tennessee's a better pick here. I think they will win this game, but it just hurts my soul when I could have gotten 3, and now I'm favored on the road versus a team who, as much as we see progress in Tennessee, their wins so far this year have been basically against the lower tier of the SEC. Yeah. You even look at that matchup at Florida where they got beat 38-14, and Florida doesn't look all that good this year. other than, wins over Mizzou, South Carolina, the aforementioned Bowling Green, this hasn't really been an overall impressive team. You look at that Ole Miss and think, oh, maybe they can play with these guys, but, that was a home game. So I'm a little bit more leery of Tennessee going on the road here as a favorite. If it's plus, I'm probably a little bit more loving to take this because I think the matchup really favors Tennessee. But as a road favorite, I'm not quite there to make that jump, even as a low one there. And then a part of me just wants to take the contrarian view with all the money, steaming in on Tennessee. I'm like...
I think this one wouldn't have got as much national attention had Kentucky not lost this past week. I think if Kentucky had kept rolling and won against Mississippi State, people really wouldn't have been, awake looking at this one, and Tennessee probably would have been getting a lot more here.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad I took last week, with Mississippi State, because that Kentucky sort of love went quickly.
As it should.
Yes. Let's move to Indiana and Michigan. Michigan, can they bounce back off I don't even know what to call that last week. Finding a very
classic.
Hard way to somehow manage to lose that game. One of the other ones I had, I made a late 11:58 wager on Michigan State, and at about 2:30, I was feeling like the moron of, as I tell you, don't make bets at 11:58 just because you are bored and you talk yourself into a game, and then, Michigan did what Michigan has pretty much done for the last 20 years here and somehow managed to blow that game. I got the Michigan State win, but Indiana's a whole different kettle of fish. They have just been awful, and you could say they're what has sabotaged Cincinnati, because I think Cincinnati thought they were going to have an 8-win team programmed in there off a Big 5 conference, and they've ended up getting the worst team in the Big 10, and didn't look good doing so and getting that win. So can Michigan bounce back here? Minus 20.5. They've covered versus these lower tier teams all season long. What do you make of this game?
Yeah, I think they bounce back quick here. Indiana's a good team to come off that tough loss with. Indiana gives up a lot of points. Should be able to run it up on them pretty good. Now that spread's a little large, but I honestly think Michigan wins big time here.
Yeah, I'm on the same. I don't know if I grabbed the 20.5, but I just think Indiana's sort of folded it up here, and get right game for Michigan before the last real part of their schedule sets up here, and they can see if they can pull off the big one at Penn State, and see how that goes, and then of course the Ohio State game to end the year. Let's move on to the Big 12, and I think Week 3, everybody was hyped about this matchup, and now we're basically watching two par teams play each other. But Texas goes to Iowa State. Iowa State still getting the love, 6.5-point favorites here. I'd probably be all over Texas, but they've looked atrocious as well. So I'm curious, which team will be more disappointing? I think will be the cue here in this game.
I'm not taking anything in this game because this is a game where anything can happen. But I actually lean Texas.
They're both
here.
good at finding ways to lose games.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with just Texas, at least consistency on offense. They're going to score points. So I think that gives them a shot to win, but now that also gives them, their defense gives them a shot to lose pretty much everything. But I'm not taking a pick here, but I like Texas.
Yeah, I don't think I'm bold enough to take Iowa State in 6.5, and I'm stunned they still keep getting these, touchdown lines. I don't know who continues to bet on Iowa State as, touchdown favorites, but they do. But I'm really not real bold in grabbing Texas from what I've seen the last, couple weeks. And then you got Sark already on the hot seat and trying to say it'll take 3 to 5 years or whatever to rebuild this, program, and already realizing that maybe he's not a good football coach. It's not like we had evidence of that before, but hey, whatever. Anyway, I think Iowa State probably pulls this game out, but there's no way I'm touching either side on this spread. They have been against the spread killers all season long, if you want to bet on either of these teams. All right, last game to round us out. Oregon goes to Washington. Washington, I don't know if they've been good, but they've found a little life to get to, 4-4 to close out the wins. Back-to-back road wins at Stanford, at Arizona. Oregon has looked good the last couple weeks. A win at UCLA, big win over Colorado. What do you make of this game? 7-point spread here in Husky Stadium in Seattle. Can Oregon go in there and dominate, or are you a little nervous on this one?
This is another one I got in on early and got 6.5. I love Oregon here. This is the only play I like this week more than Michigan State -3. Oregon's going to win 20+. They've got the ball rolling. They're going to roll in and finish the season undefeated. And a 4-4 Washington team is not going to slow them down.
Yeah, Washington wins, Arizona, Stanford, not all that great. So I think they go back to what they've been. I think Oregon goes in there and rolls, and probably rolls until the Pac-12 championship game, and then that pressure will be on them again, and we'll see how they deal with the pressure then. But I think they close out this Pac-12 season pretty good, other than that last game versus Oregon State, which should be a fun one. Oregon State will be gunning for them.
Where's that one at?
Yeah, it's in Oregon State, so we're going to Corvallis to close out the Civil War to probably ruin Oregon's season. All right,
they've done it before.
Yes, they have. We'll get into our picks. You had a 5-5 week last week. Losses with UCLA, Stanford, Oregon State, the aforementioned. We both were down on that one. Pittsburgh, ever since you've loved Pittsburgh, they've been awful. And Iowa were your losses. Your wins, you had a nice win versus Syracuse. I've gotten you on the Dino Babers train. Kansas State -3 versus TCU. You had a win. Boise State -2.5 versus Colorado State. Why Colorado State keeps getting weird spreads, we'll talk about that later in my picks. Utep +12. They didn't pull out the win. We didn't get to hype up the Utep UT San Antonio game as much as I would have liked. And then Miss State +1.5. So 5-5 week keeps you at 500, 58-58 on the year. I had a tough week at 4-7. UMass, they scored the points, but decided not to play defense in that one. Gave up 62 to Liberty. Rutgers was a win for me. Iowa, we were both a little off on that one. They decided to totally go in the tank. Utah State, a win on that one. Northwestern, we need to avoid taking them. They're on the banned list for the rest of the year. Oregon State was a loss for me. Winners, Miss State and Auburn. Loss with UNC, Louisville, and Stanford to close out. So 4-7, 57, 55-2 on the year. So if we close out this season well, we can have a pretty good year with our picks. So how many picks you got for us this week?
I've got a light week. I've only got 8. I may add more come Saturday, but I've got 8 for right now.
All right, so 8 picks for you. I got a loaded slate for me this week. So let's hear what you got to start off the week for us.
First off, I've got that matchup that you were just talking about, UTSA at Utep. I like both these teams. They both performed well, but UTSA's played a little bit more tougher competition. So I'm going to take the Roadrunners -11 on the road at Utep here.
Yeah, UT San Antonio 7-1 so far against the spread. We'll see if that continues. Utep, I believe, is also 7-1. So a battle of against the spread darlings, but UTEP was a little lucky to cover last week. They closed and scored a couple garbage touchdowns. Florida Atlantic dominated them pretty much. So, I think the UTEP ball is probably going to burst these last couple weeks. But UT San Antonio, we'll see if they can keep this up and close out undefeated. I'd like it if they could get into one of the big bowl games and just play one of the big boys just to see. But I don't have my hopes up. I think that might be a little bit, they'll probably feed them Kentucky or some nonsense.
I think they would have to have 0 losses to get all the way.
All right, first up for me, I'm going to take Rutgers plus the 13.5 versus Wisconsin. I've liked this Rutgers teams. They tend to play close games at home, Wisconsin on the road. 13.5 seems like a lot of points in that one. So I'm going to stick with Rutgers plus the 13.5.
Another one we talked about, I'm going to take Baylor minus the 6.5 at TCU. I think Baylor's going to win big here.
All right, next up for me, I mentioned this spread I thought was off. I'm going Wake plus the 2.5. I think Wake's just the better football team. They'll continue to ride here. I don't think North Carolina is the one that upsets them. So Wake plus 2.5 for me.
I've got one that's going to be on TV1 for you here, champ. I'm going to take UL Monroe plus 3.5 at Texas State. Pretty solid UL Monroe team. Wish they were getting a little bit more here. But I look at their matchups and their common opponents, and I like UL Monroe here.
Well, that game was on my eyeballs, and I got that one too. I have UNM Monroe plus the 3.5 versus Texas State here. They're just the better football team if you look at it. Yeah. They got the better wins, really. And so we both are on the UL Monroe bandwagon. We should have jumped on it a little sooner because now we're only getting 3.5 instead of our 14 to 20. That would have been much, much better. So I have that one as well. I talked about it. I have Illinois plus the 14.5 as well. We talked about Illinois 14.5. This will be a slow paced game, and I like Illinois getting those kind of points.
Next up for me, we talked about it again. Another heavy road favorite for me this week. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Probably not. Doesn't usually. But I'm taking Oregon minus the 6.5 at Washington. I think Oregon's going to keep rolling here against a mediocre Washington team.
Yeah. Next up for me, interesting game. I'm taking Memphis plus the 5.5 for SMU. I just think that's a lot of points for SMU to go on the road after that. I don't know if anybody watched it, but SMU came all the way back. Houston was doing Houston things, and they came back, tied it, and then had a 101-yard kickoff return to lose the game as the game closed out. So I don't know if they can quite recover off that and then go. Memphis hasn't been all that good of late, but I still respect them at home, and I think that'll be a tough bounce back for SMU after pretty much having fate in their hands and then losing it because of a garbage kick return. But hey, Houston, still got that one. Champs, come on, baby. All right, what do you got next?
Next up, I've got Wake Forest plus the 2.5 at North Carolina. I'm going to take the undefeated team getting points here.
All right, you'll like this one. I'm going to ride Maryland. I'm off Northwestern and now going into the Maryland world to be thoroughly disappointed with them getting massacred. But right now, I don't think Penn State can massacre anyone. So 10.5 points at home, I think is pretty good value here for Maryland. Though I'm thoroughly prepared to look up and see 45-7 and be disappointed in that one.
My next play is going to be in the homecoming for Hugh Freeze, Liberty at Ole Miss. I'm going to take Ole Miss minus 9.5. I think this offense is going to just bury this Hugh Freeze Liberty team. Now, while they may give up 30 or 40 points, I think Ole Miss is going to score every bit of 60 to 70 points in this one. So I like Ole Miss minus the 9.5.
Well, I will say I had this one in my list, and I made a last-minute cut. I think Ole Miss is going to bury them and score 1 billion points. But then I got a little nervous that there's some handshake agreement where we're just going to trade touchdowns and pump each other's stats up so we both become first-round NFL draft picks and collect a lot of money and disappoint people in the future in the NFL because neither are probably NFL-level quarterbacks. So that got me a little nervous, and we end up with some worthless 70-66 game here, and I didn't know to trust the cover. So it was a last-minute cross-off. But that being said, there might be another 11:58 bet that goes on Ole Miss as I'm bored and wanting to throw money around on that one. Next up for me, I talked about it. I'm going to ride Purdue plus the 3 versus Michigan State. We were on opposite sides of this one, so we'll see how this one plays out.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and that was my last one, but I'll go ahead and say it. I got Michigan State minus the 3 at Purdue.
All right, I got a handful of more, so it's a fun week for me.
I got one more too, so go ahead.
I'm going to go with Cincinnati minus 22.5 versus Tulsa. I think Cincinnati knows it needs to just annihilate these teams coming up. They probably will not be able to annihilate SMU and Houston, but Tulsa is ripe for annihilation. So Cincinnati at home, they can play off, a little bit of emotion here. Nobody respects us card. So I think they roll up Tulsa pretty good. Tulsa coming across into Cincinnati. So I like the 22.5 there.
My last pick, I've got Tennessee plus 105 on the money line against Kentucky. Got a little bit of value there while it was still there. But I think Tennessee's going to win this one.
Well, they're going to be 3-point favorites by Saturday. So
easy. It would not surprise me if it gets over 4 or 5.
If it gets to -3, I'm just letting everybody know I'm taking Kentucky at that point. So
I think it will. As fast as it's been moving, it's moved, 4.5 points already?
Yes, just in the week. Now, I don't know how much of that we should probably say we are based in Knoxville. So a lot of our odds are catered to that. If we move up to New Jersey or something, Kentucky still might be favored by 3 points. So if you're capable of flying around, you might want to mosey around and take whatever lines you can. And you could probably get Tennessee and Kentucky both +3 by Saturday. Anyway, next up for me, West Virginia plus the 3.5. In that one, I mentioned I'm just going to ride West Virginia getting points at home. Another fun one, Wyoming plus 3.5 points at home versus Colorado State. Wyoming struggled a little bit here, but it's not like Colorado State's been good. They had a pop of a little 2-game stretch where they won games, but basically the last couple of weeks they've been awful. You mentioned it. You got that nice Boise State win in a line that was ridiculous. The week before I got Utah State versus Colorado State. Utah State getting plus at home versus Colorado State. So Wyoming at home at plus 3.5 I just think is value there. Mississippi State plus the 5.5 versus Arkansas. We talked about that one. And then lastly, the big one, UNLV plus 2.5 versus New Mexico.
I was waiting for a UMass bet.
No UMass bet this week, but we're going to the other side with the U's. This might be the one chance UNLV has to get a win this year. So they're going down to New Mexico plus 2.5. If you look at the numbers, UNLV technically has been a little bit better than New Mexico, though the wins don't show it. So grab UNLV plus the 2.5 this week. And that's our picks. We'll be back on Monday to do our review show. We missed it this week. We got a little bit busy and bogged down in alternate life mode outside of the Green Light Network, but we'll be back on Monday to give our review. Be sure to like and subscribe. Don't miss any of our programming tomorrow. Achilles Reign comes in for the NFL. We got a big showdown coming up Sunday. The Dynamite David is pumped up, though a little sad in the soul due to Derrick Henry. But the battle of the Greenlight Network All-Stars and the Rams versus the Titans coming up, so you don't want to miss that. Winning Daily, we'll have some NBA action. We're going to have a little Breeders' Cup action as well coming up during the weekend. You don't want to miss any of that stuff. Our college basketball is coming sooner and sooner. You don't want to miss that. Dynamite is already getting fired up. Season tickets to the Vols. He's going to be there watching them make their push to see if they can ride out a good season. So like, subscribe. That's our show, and we're out.
Greenlight Network presents Football Time.